address him, and it's also easier. Chong has more than 20 years of experience in training, vocational education, and technical, which is a crucial vehicle for promoting social equity, inclusion, and sustainable development. Welcome, Chong. I'd also like to say hi to Ms. Koo Gyok Boon, the CEO of SG Enable. Gyok Boon has been helming SG Enable since its establishment in 2013, and it's an agency dedicated to enabling persons with disabilities and also helps foster a more inclusive society. Let's also welcome Mr. Riyad Medeb, the Director AI at the UNDP Global Center for Technology, Innovation, and Sustainable Development. Earlier on, we heard from the UNDP New York office. Well, lucky for us, Riyad is based in the Singapore office, and he brings with him more than 25 years of experience in sustainable development and economics. And I'd also like to welcome back our keynote speaker, Ms. Mo Shui, the President of Business Development at Infinity Studios. Welcome, everybody. Okay, can't wait to dive into this conversation right now, right? How cross-sector collaboration can galvanize synergistic change. I want to start with you first, Shui. Having had vast amounts of experience working in the private sector and now also starting your own community-based environmental initiative, what are some of the synergistic benefits you've come across working across the different sectors?
Well, thanks, Yvonne. I think sharing from my experience would be that the cross-pollination between the private sector and the social or charity or not-for-profit, right, I think is one that has got not only a transfer of knowledge, right, but it actually leveraging off each other. The cross-pollination comes forward with one putting in better best practices, I would say, a more framework or mindset around compliance and processes. Whereas when it comes to the social enterprise and not-for-profit, I think they have more leeway for making errors. They are given more government help and resources. So in a not so good way, productivity is not the most important outcome in terms of monetary benefit. But I think the nurturing of the human individual and I think the cohesiveness in the family and the society. So therefore, when you put both together, you get best practices, you get processes, you get transfer of knowledge, while the other side will pick it up as a different type of output, not only as a product-based output, but an emotional output and a family output. I think that's a very good marriage in a sense. And you can also work with products that are not so, what I call technologically demanding, because actually there's a lot of things that we use day to day that doesn't need to be high tech, doesn't need to be fast, and it can be done in a very good way and in a very, how should I say, more moderate and less demanding environment. But the economic returns may not be so big. You're not going to get like 50% growth every year if you want to do something like that, but you probably be very happy with 20, 30%. But a lot of people get involved with it and everybody gets a role to play. So the emotional fulfillment will come about. It's a very long-winded way.
Yeah, you were saying during your keynote speech, right, that the feel-good factor, that feel-good feedback loop feeds into the cycle, right, where you get more and more people involved and hopefully in a small incremental bits widen that circle.
Yeah, so it will not be all driven by economic returns in dollar terms, but the feel good impact is not just about the individual feeling good. It's also the family and the community. At the same time, right, if it's curated properly, you get a very useful product, that could be very pervasive across being very used across, at the grassroots level. Yeah.
I think the keyword there is curate the right product as well. Thank you, Shui. Let's bring Chong into the conversation. What role does the Asian Development Bank have to play here in terms of, how the ADB can bring about closer collaboration between the public and private sectors and the civil society in specifically ADB financed projects? Chong.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. Very good afternoon to all. Before I sort of jump into responding to this question, I sort of wanted to say that I really enjoy Sui's keynote speech just now. And I think her hobby actually carries a lot of weight, and we actually have a lot to learn from her. Yeah. So ADB is a regional development bank that aim for an Asia Pacific region free from poverty. Our mission is to help our developing member countries reduce poverty and improve the quality of life of the people, through inclusive economic and environmentally sustainable growth. And at the same time, also you want to foster better regional integration. So ADB is owned by 68 member countries or economy, and Singapore is one of the member. And in fact, Singapore was a founding member and Singapore joined in 1966. So, but in Singapore, we don't actually do a lot of work in Singapore itself. It was only last year, 2020, just before the lockdown of COVID-19, our Singapore office was inaugurated. So it is about slightly more than a year since then. ADB, we actually provide loans and grants to developing members to support development in sectors such as education, health, social protection, urban, transport, agriculture, and energy. So I'm with the education sector. My main portfolio is actually in technical vocational education and training, as well as higher education. And in the next 3 years, just for the education sector development alone, ADB is going to provide loans or grants to the amount of around US $5 billion. So in supporting the government of our developing member countries to reform their education sector, we are required to actually incorporate in our project design, inclusive design to support the marginalized group in the society, and also to have close collaboration of the public education institution with civil society and private sectors. So just an example, in designing and developing curriculum for technical vocational education and training, we would require state curriculum bodies and learning institutions to incorporate standards and content requirements from the industry practitioner, and at the same time seek endorsement from industry representative bodies or associations. That also include employers that actually actively higher marginalized group of society. This actually help to ensure relevant skills are imparted to students. So in an example is that we actually encourage relevance of skills and knowledge applicable to the grassroots level. Learning institutions are actually encouraged to actively engage in problem solving in villages and rural areas, often engaging the grassroots through civil society, which are active and familiar with problems at the local level. So by creating projects that encourage close working relationship between public, private, and civil society, we are able to create an ecosystem where we can leverage on each other's strength and achieve greater synergistic impact. This usually leads to greater opportunity for the students, even in the rural areas where youth usually suffers from the lack of opportunities and employment prospects. So at the same time, employers from the private sector are also able to recruit well-trained students with a relevant skill set. So sort of to sum it up, being a financier, we are able to encourage and foster greater collaboration among the public and private sector and the civil society, leading to better outcome, impact of the project that we finance. So I stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chong. It does seem like for the ADB side, it requires a lot of effort to galvanize and champion, these changes, because you're working with so many different sectors and you have to get all these various sectors on board as well. That's no mean feat. Thank you, Chong. We have some questions coming in. Thank you for that. We will be going to the questions just a little later, so just keep those questions coming in, where we love to hear from you. Thank you. So Hyuk Boon, coming to you now. This might be quite a difficult question, so I'm going to shoot it straight at you, because we know that collective impact is so difficult to measure, right? I mean, what is collective good, collective impact? And especially when we have to be accountable to key stakeholders and the public. Can you give us some examples of the tools or guiding principles that organizations can use to measure collective impact, Hyuk Boon?
Sure. Thanks, Yvonne, for that question. Let me address it from our experience managing the Enabling Lives Initiative grant, which brings together best ideas from the community or social sector agencies. I see a lot of friends from the social sector agencies here today, social enterprises as well, tertiary institutions, researchers, innovators, to create scalable, impactful innovations for persons with disabilities. So from our experience, the grant, or the Enabling Lives Initiative grant, funded by ToteBot, is actually built upon a collective impact framework. And I think 3 guiding principles of collective impact are worth highlighting here. So the first principle, the grant clearly articulates desired outcomes based on a common understanding of the existing gaps and challenges in the disability space to allow grantees to adopt a joint approach to problem solving. Having a shared agenda and shared goals is the first step. The model also entails a common impact measurement, measuring the sum of collective outputs and outcomes with grantees using a common toolkit for data collection and analysis. So as we seek to build capabilities, shared learning is also a very important principle in this model. That's why we have lovely keynote speakers to share with us what they have embarked on. And we learn and we try to scale. So we have witnessed many such sharing across different players as a means to build trust and to deepen impact. So by adopting a collective impact model, what the Enabling Lives Initiative grant does is essentially playing the enabler role, curating problem statements, creating opportunities, platforms for people to come together, collaborate, bring about greater value, greater impact, and to address your question specifically, how do we measure impact? So we had the Institute of System Science, NUS, and Lien Center for Social Innovation, SMU, work with us to co-develop a toolkit for grantees and the social impact measurement framework. So the framework measures the overall project and grant performance, essentially is program reach and its program impact. So circling back to Shui's wonderful pilot and echoing Shui, the inclusive circle that she has painstakingly built and led, I think the Green Circular Economic Project with inclusive work and opportunities, that's how I would see Shui's project to be, taps existing community resources and human connections. And it certainly has legs to run. And as environment, social and governance, or ESG, grow in importance in our society, if more of us join in the effort, and if we are powered by, say, the Enabling Lives Initiative grant, we would be able quite immediately to multiply impact dramatically and grow more organic, inclusive circles as part of our social compact.
Thank you so much, Gyok Boon. Many great pointers that you mentioned there. I was furiously taking notes: shared agenda, shared goals, shared learnings, and some of these wonderful initiatives that you also highlighted. Thank you. Coming to you now, Riyad, you've also had a lot of experience working across different sectors, and that includes providing policy advisory to governments. What strength do you think each sector can bring to the table, private, public, and people, and which key areas can they influence, Riyad?
Thank you very much, Ivana. I would like to talk based on what was said previously by my predecessor and also by my colleague, Adriana. With the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, 193 United Nations member states pledged to ensure no one will be left behind and to endeavor to reach the furthest behind first. So in practice, this means taking explicit action to end extreme poverty, curb inequalities, confront discrimination, and fast-track progress for the furthest behind. So what does it mean? We can reach the Sustainable Development Goals if we have this partnership, a triptych partnership between private sector, public sector, and civil society. And that's what United Nations have developed this 2030 agenda. But this 2030 agenda was not developed just like that. It was developed by doing a global survey of 1 million people all around the world. It was developed by doing a survey through the civil society, all the population, and to create what are your own targets, what are your own objectives. And to respond to that for a successful sustainable development, it is one condition is the three of them has to work together. It is not only the responsibility of the government, it's the responsibility of the civil society, the one benefiting from it. It is the responsibility of the private sector, who is a key actor for mobilizing resources. But it is also the responsibility of the government to put in place a framework where the private sector can be really active, where the civil society can work together hand in hand with the government. And this is the work of the whole United Nations working together. And this is not only the case of developing countries, where it is the role of UNDP working mostly on developing countries, but this is the case of an agenda of the whole world, from the north to the south, to the south to the north, working together in tripartite agreement, private sector, public sector, and civil society. We have very good examples, for example, here in Singapore. We have an initiative called Youth Collab with the City Foundation, where we are working together with the youth on entrepreneurship. You see, and responding to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have other initiatives such as the Business Call to Action initiative, which regroup 280 companies, reach out to 700 million people and individuals in 82 countries, where we respond as private sector together to sustainable development. It means that is all of us, we are responsible to it, all of us, we are working to it, all of us could be a success if the three of us, the three actors work together.
It is a collaborative responsibility. It's just no one party that is able to do it alone, isn't it? Thank you.
From design to implementation together.
All the way. Thank you so much, Riyad. We have this question now from Slido to Shui, and let me read it out for you. That says, how would you encourage corporates to start their community giving in a more sustainable and strategic manner? Shui, how would you encourage corporates to start their community giving in a more sustainable and strategic manner?
Well, I'm trying to put on the private sector hat myself, right? Having been in a CFO role for almost all my life, you know, and I think it has to be implemented as a within the company. A lot of it is top driven. So I think the larger environment where there's a call for action from the government and the media has to play a role. And then the way I looked at it is that at the top level, the senior management must come together and make a decision that this will be incorporated into the KPI in the company. You know, it could be put under a category called what we always know as a CSR, you know, corporate social responsibility or whatever. It must be given importance in the company, right? And resources has to be spent to educate. So it's not, there's no magic bullet or a magic wand as a formula, but it has to be a concerted top-down effort together with a government overlay that encourages it. So the way I looked at it again is what we say, the private, public, and civil coming together, and it's the same for the company, the way I looked at it. Yeah.
That kind of echoes what Riyad has earlier mentioned too. Thank you so much, Shui. We've got another question here, and this one to Gyok Boon. How can we bring together all the key stakeholders and line up their agendas for cross-sector collaboration? In Singapore's context, what are the strengths and challenges?
Yeah, I think we have to start by conversation. People knowing what exactly our priorities and focus areas are, what would be common areas of interest. So I think that starting point to shape the agenda together will be important. So I often feel that where corporates could do more would be in areas like inclusive hiring or social procurement. So in inclusive hiring, we ought to have a strong business case to do that. And if we recall what Anna shared earlier this afternoon, there are real tangible benefits to the corporate culture, to employee retention, to talent attraction. And if taken as a whole, there must be that leadership as well as a strong business case for inclusive hiring. But beyond that, I think every company would have a finite number of positions you could look at for hiring. So beyond that, I think social procurement is a big way that companies could come in to support hiring of or giving persons with disabilities work opportunities in a more sheltered kind of environment. So I think for corporates who would like to do more, the first is to look at the internal readiness. So are we looking at inclusive hiring? Are we looking at social procurement? Or are we looking at certain other priorities? And if there's a nexus, if there's a keen interest in the area of disability inclusion, SG Enable and our partners would be more than willing to start that conversation to bring together common problem statements and to put in the resources and forge the right partnerships to enable some of these projects or programs to be built up.
I'm hearing what you're saying there, that corporates could do more in the areas of inclusive hiring as well as social procurement. And if they need some help in that area, please go to Gyok Boon at SG Enable, right? Who will help them foster that more inclusive culture in their organizations as well. Am I right?
Right. And I think because I'm very confident in saying that because I've got social sector agency friends, social enterprises here. We come from the people sector. We probably understand some of the gaps and the needs of the very people, the vulnerable group of people that we are trying to support or work with. And with them as one sector, I think we can then find common areas of interest, the nexus, and work on them for collective outcomes.
Thank you so much, Gyok Boon. That's very encouraging to know as well. So as a parting note, because I'm mindful of the time too, I want to know, right, I think there are a lot of challenges to getting cross-sector collaboration to work. Some people say talking is not enough. Oh, there's a lot of red tape. I have to go through so and so and so. What are some of these key challenges that need to be overcome, and what are the strategies? Chong.
Yes, I think, in my line of work, we see, we deal a lot with the government, as well as the private sector, So, it's very common, coming from the private sector that says that, to deal with the government, not just, I'm not talking about Singapore government, but I believe it's, in many other countries as well. The bureaucracy, is one of the hardest to address, especially if you work in the country, say, India, Bangladesh, there's a lot of bureaucracy, involved. So, the private sector usually finds it very hard to navigate, even if they want to, do a lot of collaboration. But on the other hand, if you, if you talk to the government official, they also have a lot of hesitant, to work with the private sector, namely, because, they say the private sector are very profit-driven, or business driven, they are not really, helping the government in addressing the key performance indicators that the government set. So, how we sort of go about, to address this barrier, just now, I mentioned that, we actually, foster a lot of collaboration, with the public, private sector as well as civil society, in reality, that is really very tough work. So, we did see some success, in the past, projects where we are able to, as part of the project, establish a new government agency, and we put in place, a board of the governors or board of directors in the new government agency, where private sectors are very well represented. In fact, in one of the projects, we even have a chairman, coming from the private sector, leading a government agency, and that sort of entirely transformed, how the industry training institute in the particular state, is organized, is managed, from leadership right down to collaboration with industry projects in the industry training institute. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chong. Riyad, just very quickly, please. How do you think we can overcome these cross-sector collaboration challenges?
I think this is the raison d'être of the United Nations, because we have challenges that we can have to support government, not only in putting in place regulatory and institutional framework in order to be able to work together, but also building the capacities of those countries, not only at the governmental level, but also as civil society, empowering civil society of taking the responsibilities, building the capacity of the private sector in order for them to come around the table and work with us together. This is the normal work of day-to-day work of the United Nations. So for us, challenges, this is our job.
Bring it on, right? Bring it on for you guys. Thank you for doing what you do, Riyadh. Shui, very quickly from you, please. How shall we overcome this? We just have you unmute yourself.
Yeah. Well, you know, everybody talked about the government being the Pied Piper type of leadership. Yeah. But I think if I look at it from a micro level, from the company, if I want to do it, I would just hardwire a portion of my profit to do this. I will just allocate resources, and the easiest resources is money. You know, once you put money in there, it drives behavior. Like, you know, and you put in policies in a company. I do that myself, you know, in my own company, I allocate and I put in resources, and I kind of hardwire it that way. So I think at various levels, you know, from leadership at the macro level, from the government to the top leadership in the company to the various departments, and then, you know, also at the shareholder overlay, various layers, they must come together and get synced up. And at the end of the day, I feel that we have to put skin in the game. You just have to allocate profits to it. You just allocate, you know, and then hardwire it and put it into a KPI. Of course, it must be reasonable, right? To say that, and that you must be accountable. So much so that is at the beginning, you may even need to start to ask, why did you not spend this money for this giving, you know, and make a task force to do it. If we're serious about it, like the way we conduct our businesses, right?
Very clear, black and white there.
Yeah, I'm just very practical about it. Put the resources, get a task force, get it going.
I like it. Get it done, right? These are the steps. Just do it. And thank you so much, Shui. And Gyokpo, just very quickly from you too.
Yeah, I think, Yvonne, I will circle back to the same key barrier that I see often, which is the lack of information and understanding of what gaps are and what needs are. So to overcome this, I think the first step is to curate problem statements and have a common agenda, right? What exactly is the problem that we want to tackle? And having a matchmaker, having the Enabling Lives Initiative, for example, play the matchmaker role to connect potential collaborators. I think that's a very useful strategy as well. And I have many good stories, including one by Digital Dream to highlight. So if you allow me, Digital Dream is actually a social enterprise started by a group of retirees. And as retirees, they brought in immersive technology from the UK and wanted to share the technology and know-how to improve learning outcomes of children with autism. So they started with that, something to offer, right, from the civil society. And a successful match between Digital Dream and our social service agencies led to 3 of our special schools becoming early adopters, and at the same time developing capabilities, and that's very important, developing their own capabilities alongside Digital Dream to create their own content and learning packages for the students so that the impact is a continuous one.
Thank you so much for the example, Gyokpo, and the matchmaker role that you talked about too. Mr. Eric Chua, I see you've raised your hand. Did you want to say something, sir?
Yes, actually, in my program, I was told that I wasn't supposed to speak in this segment, but I just want to make...
Please, we welcome your inputs as well.
So, well, to the point earlier about, you know, the private sector versus the public-private as well as people sector, right? So we were all kind of traipsed quite gingerly around each other, not quite sure of what each other's motivations or you know, our objectives would be. And I think I would just want to go back to the figurative party that Anna said that we were all invited to, the diversity party. And I'll take a very humanist view of things, because even as individuals, as human beings, at a party, if you're meeting somebody for the first time, you will naturally have, you know, that first minute kind of judgment. try to suss out what this person that I'm interacting with, that I'm interfacing with, what is she thinking, what is he thinking, and what does she think, or what does he think of me as well. So that's all of that. But I think I would just want to quote, the tagline of a sports brand: "Just do it," right? If we could just, rush headlong into getting things done together, I think that's a good first step. Well, things doesn't have to be scaled at the first instance. Things doesn't have to be hunky-dory in the first instance, but as long as there's interaction, or the start of interaction, the start of collaboration, I think that's a good beginning to have. I'm not sure if it makes sense, because I'm just coming from a very humanist point of view. It's a very generic point, but I just want to say that and get it off my chest.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chua. It's great to have your inputs too. And I think I can see my panelists smiling too, and they're nodding, and I believe they agree with you. Everybody wants to be able to dance at the party. And it doesn't have to be, when you start something, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be on a big scale. But if you are on the same page and you start small and you hold hands together, actions can grow and multiply, in the words of Shui and the words of Gyok Boon too. So thank you so much, Palsek, for contributing there. Stay with us, because we might want you to also share your inputs for panel 2. Oh, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I just want to say again a thank you to Chong, to Riyadh, to Gyok Boon, and to Shui. You shared some wonderful insights on how key stakeholders from corporates, the business, governments, as well as social service have a role to play in coordinating efforts and combining resources to address some of the most pressing challenges so that we can achieve collective impact, in the words of Mr. Eric Chua, together. And just do it. Thank you so much, everyone.